Labor relations, the one thing we wish Ryan and JP abided by in business. The Labor Relations Act is a document that is supposed to protect the relationships between people in the workforce and helps the business world strive for a framework of success. Welcome to MKIE. Labor relations have to do with everything that is involved between employer and employee, and the Labor Relations Act, or LRA, protects employees and enforces the fundamental rights in the Constitution, whilst also ensuring a variety of other things like economic development, labor peace, social justice, and democracy. Now, because this section is very vast, I'm going to break down this lesson into two videos. This one that you're watching right now will focus on discipline and fair dismissal, while the next one will be about relationships and negotiations. So, let's start with discipline. Firstly, why does it exist? So discipline is not designed to punish people, but rather improve them. The focus of discipline is displaying where the right and wrong is, because in the end, you want a better environment in the workforce. So let's keep that in mind as we go through this section. Improvement, not punishment. Now, why do we punish people? Because they do something wrong. In this business case, they either break the code of ethics, the code of conduct, or any other disciplinary policy. A business must always have these documents, because otherwise, how is an employee going to know when they are in the right or in the wrong? Because businesses change things. Now, the document that states what's right and wrong will also have the consequences of the offense, and this is important because otherwise someone can get fired for spilling coffee, which is unacceptable because different offenses must have different levels of discipline due to the Labor Relations Act as it states this. These different levels of discipline vary, but usually a low offense will require coaching of the employee, whilst higher level offenses will deal with suspension, demotion, dismissal, and more. Another policy that is important with discipline is the grievance policy. This policy is another level of protection for the employee, as it has to do with how an employee can settle a dispute with a business. So let me explain it to you very quickly. The employee will first go to a supervisor with the issue. If the issue can't be resolved, then it goes to the manager. If the problem still continues, then it will land up at an external labor court if it can't be solved inside the business. These are things such as the CCMA and other organizations like this, which we'll be covering later in the section. Now, we have seen that there are controls to the level of corrective action in the business, but in every case, the most severe one is dismissal. When someone gets fired from a business, it often turns their lives upside down. Now, due to this, there has to be an appropriate procedure in the business, as well as reasons that have to be followed according to the Labor Relations Act, further protecting an employee. The reasons that can allow for an employee to be dismissed are, firstly, dismissal due to incapacity. This means that the employee cannot do their job. This can either be due to a lack of skill set, underperformance, or poor health. So essentially, a lot of people should be dismissed in this country. Sorry, sir, I think you're out for the count. Now, according to the LRA, a business must consider all options before dismissal, whether that can be demotion, job transfer, or training. Dismissal, however, always has to be the last option. Now, you must note that this incapacity reason does not apply to new recruits because they are subject to a probation period where they are allowed to do things wrong with the supervision of a supervisor. Now, this relates to training, as we spoke about earlier in the series. The second reason that you can be dismissed is dismissal based on misconduct. This clause means that if an employee did indeed break a rule which needs to be abided by, is constantly enforced, then they can be dismissed after appropriate warning. This is how, like, some people get expelled after DCs and stuff. The last reason is dismissal due to operational reasons. So like retrenchment is allowed in the business if the business is being restructured, and another reason is that if the business is facing economic difficulties, machine replacement, and if the business just closes. This clause in the LRA actually allowed for the dismissal of Praveen Gordhan because he lost his job due to a restructuring that occurred. Now, all of these reasons have to be fair, according to the LRA. The LRA ensures fairness in the first two reasons by having a guideline for fair judgment of dismissal. The guideline basically says that the person accused of incapacity or misconduct has the right to trial this judgment by a disciplinary. This disciplinary must be understandable by the accused, so like there can be a translator there, headed by a chairperson, and be capable of a transfer to the CCMA Labour Court. Now, fairness of dismissal because of retrenchment and restructuring is very vague, and the guidelines say that the proper steps must have been taken to avoid retrenchment, and the employee must be treated fairly after retrenchment, like things like such as severance bonds, notice periods, etc. You can see how Godon got dismissed. Now that I've told you about how discipline has to be fair and the measures that are taken in order to ensure fairness, but now it's time to go into what happens if there is in fact unfair treatment and or dismissal. The actions that constitute unfair treatment are when benefits aren't given correctly, unreasonably long probationary periods, unfair discrimination, this excludes limitations of course, any incorrect given disciplinary action, failing to uphold terms of a negotiation, and unfair treatment after whistleblowing. This also relates to Bovin Godin. Unfair dismissal is any dismissal where the employee was incorrectly dismissed for reasons such as pregnancy, race, strikes, trade union meetings, and a multitude of other things that the employee is just not in control out of. Now, once unfair treatment or dismissal is established to be true, there are only 3 ways that this can be rectified by the business. 2 ways. And these are re-employment, compensation, or a combination of these 2. Now, obviously, the rectification depends on the situation, and there are times when compensation and re-employment are not possible. Re-employment is not possible if the dismissal was only procedurally incorrect. So let's say they actually did something wrong, but the business just followed the wrong procedure. And if the employee doesn't actually want to come back, which is pretty self-explanatory. Compensation is not possible if the employee wants more than the worth of 24 months' salary. So if a teacher wants a compensation of 2 million rand, they're actually only gonna get about 50,000. Now, we have finally come to the end of a really long discipline-related LRA rundown. This is obviously the first section, and the second section will come later. To conclude, in this video you learnt what the Labor Relations Act is, why discipline exists, the reasons for dismissal, corrective action, levels of corrective action, fair treatment, unfair treatment, and rectification. Thank you for watching this jam-packed lesson of MKIE. We'll see you in the next one.
I gave my cards away, we'll lose a game for